Back. Welcome to the live stream. Today's Sunday, June 4th, and you might notice it's not a team stream today. Patrick's daughter is turning 12. Happy birthday, Lucy! And yeah, we'll see Watson back again soon. But I'm flying solo today, and that's always a bit more challenging for me. But hopefully, you folks will see me through this. And what else do I have to say? Yeah, Friday, I did a sort of an abrupt. I had an abrupt end to my live stream. There was a lot of distracting noise, and it kind of spoiled my my flow, my vibe, whatever you want to call it. So rather than sort of try to stumble through it, I just sort of threw in the towel and called it a day for that. So yeah, if that was disappointing, hopefully that first 25 minutes that I did do was interesting to people. Hopefully it was still satisfying to some degree, and I'll do my best to not let that happen. But even astrologers sometimes don't have total control over the situation. Go figure. All right. I'm just going to quickly double check and make sure my YouTube channel is showing this video, and then I'll get started. I've certainly had a lot of, where am I here? Okay. And probably, yeah, there I am. Okay. So that's all happening. That is all working. And now where has my stream gone? Oh, there we are. Okay. I need a script to stick to. Hey guys. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. The original sort of idea of doing the live stream was to just sort of talk off the top of our heads and have a conversation. I mean, this was between Patrick and I. And that's still sort of the theory, but chances are it'll get more sort of scripted as I go along. Part of the reason I'm doing this is just to sort of, um, sort of spill out all the all the thoughts I have, so it helps me organize them so I can present what I'm doing in a more sort of structured way. But just to get it there, I just need to keep talking and engaging with people. One problem that I've been talking about the planetary synodic cycles for a long time. But I found that, until I came up with my sort of scheme, the intervals and the phases that, if you're watching, you're probably familiar with what I've done there. Until I came up with that scheme, I tended to confuse people unnecessarily, because planetary synodic cycles are actually very simple, much easier than other facets of astrology. Like, really, if you can learn horoscopic astrology, the aspects and zodiacal releasing and all this stuff, secondary progressions, if you can learn all that stuff, then getting a grip on planetary synodic cycles is really child's play. But somehow, on my end of things, it took me a long time just to learn how to explain them to people and make it simple. I've got 4 planets in Virgo, so I don't always, sometimes I sort of talk over people's heads, and I try not to do that as a educator, I guess, is what I'm doing. But it is a weakness of mine, I have to admit. So with all that being said, I'm getting a lot of really great feedback and interaction from you all regarding these live streams. It's really encouraging. People have a lot of questions still. I think a lot of you are quite intrigued by what I've been doing with the Venus synodic cycles, and you want to see where you fit into the situation. And I think more importantly, I'm presuming a fair number of you are practicing astrologers, either professionally or at the very least that you're out there in the world reading charts for people in some capacity. And the great thing about planetary synodic cycles is they really transcend any style of astrology. They can fit in anywhere. Even if you're doing Vedic astrology and using the sidereal zodiac, even within that system, this material um, still applies. It's still useful, and it's great. It can just sort of overlay any other sort of facet of astrology that you're doing. Okay, so I have Nia, who is speaking to me in French and therefore making herself probably uh, um, uncomprehensible to other viewers. But that's fine. I'm in Montreal. Anytime I walk out the door, I'm living in a French world, so I understand. But maybe some of the other viewers don't. But so it goes. I guess they can copy your French text, go to Google translate it, and then they're no. You don't need to apologize, Nia. I'm being silly. I have as part of my I think my Gen X makeup, my sense of humor is don't apologize, Nia. I'm sort of half kidding. My sense of humor can be quite deadpan. I had a little sort of thing on Twitter the other day with good old Michel, who maybe a lot of you know if you're in the Astro Twitter world. Yeah, I was just kidding around with him, and he was. I'll go to the start of it. I the other day I posted during the abrupt 25-minute live stream the other day. I was talking about the First World War. Oh, there, Michelle. Hey, Michelle. So yeah, I hope Michelle. I hope you knew that I was just kind of playing around. I wasn't trying to accuse you of being Beria or Kissinger or anything like that. That was my idea of humor. But sometimes these things, yeah, very, my humor is just very dry, and it doesn't always come across because I don't say, hey, this is a joke, and then that gets me into some trouble. Still putting aloe vera. Okay, I think Michelle's. He probably knew all along, and I'm probably worrying unnecessarily. So Nia from Congo Coffee, we did the Michael Jackson family and Louis XIV comparison. Okay, yes. Yeah, yeah. I remember. Okay, cool. Michelle loves my humor. I don't need to apologize. That's good. Yeah, it's just, it's who I am, and I'm never out to hurt anyone. But I have a feeling from time to time, I'm just sensitive to my insensitivity, because yeah, I'm really thrilled that people are involved. The last thing I want to do is insult them and chase them away. All right, cool. Everyone's on board, and now Elsa is also speaking French to me. See what you've done, Nia. And don't apologize. That's a joke. It's fine. Ça me dérange pas si on parle français ici de temps en temps. I can always have Michel on and he can speak Spanish, and then I'll be just as confused as the rest of you who don't speak French. It's a multilingual world out there. So I'm wondering where I should start. I thought maybe, especially back on Monday, we had such a great time. I think Monday was really, my favorite stream so far. And part of the reason for that was I really put myself in your hands, and I got such great feedback that I didn't have to think too hard about what I wanted to say. You folks asked me questions, and I just sort of jumped in, and we wound up talking about all those bands and what cycles they were born under, and then I think I wound up talking about Donald Trump at the end too, and that was also interesting as that guy ever gets. Anyway, so yeah, I've one of the things that's been coming up. Maybe I'll just jump in with sort of what we've been talking about on Twitter. One of the things that obviously some people are intrigued about is this ephemeris that I made for the Venus intervals. I also have one for the phases. Where's astrology? No, wait a minute. What am I doing? I'm in the wrong place. There we are. So I have one for phases and one for intervals. This is what I made myself. And yeah, they go into about the 2050s, and then they go back as far as like the 15 or 1400s. I think the intervals go back, yeah, even further than I did the phases. Now, this is really time consuming. And yeah, Watson and I are working towards being able to sort of get teach IA, IA, AI, artificial intelligence to. I mean, we've already got it sort of working with the ephemeris. That's the first step, but ultimately, it would be really great if we could just get AI to correctly generate or generate correct versions of the intervals and phases in their own right. With some kind of, maybe developed into some kind of app or website or something where any of you at any time, even after I'm long gone, can go and look up these phases. Truth be told, though, um, you're all very serious about astrology. And if you're, what I can tell you, like I was saying at the beginning, these things are actually really, really simple. Especially the Venus synodic cycle is really, really simple. And I dare say, I don't having been so ginger, uh, um, in the beginning about, not wanting to offend anyone, but I dare say that, like, if you can't memorize these fairly quickly, that that there's probably some. I'd be really concerned, especially like you're all such serious astrologers. You can all learn far more complicated concepts than this. I mean, astrology is a really, really challenging discipline. And this is so simple. The best way to think of it really is that there are 8 kinds of years, okay? Uh, it's really that's how I do this. What am I looking for? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna just pull up there we are. Just pull this up. This is the wheel that depicts both the phases and the intervals in one circle. So if you've seen, once again, I think I have to say this just nominally at the beginning of all my live streams. If you haven't watched my video on my YouTube channel, Introduction to the Venus Synodic Cycle, all of this is going to be completely baffling to you. But if you have seen the video, it's only about 11, 20, 12 minutes long, then you're prepared to sort of engage with me here. I mean, that's why I made that video, so that, like, so the first step, I don't have to keep teaching people what the cycle is, and I can spend more time talking about how it applies, in natal charts, in transits, and in long chronologies, all the ways that I've applied it. Like I'm saying, there are 8 kinds of years. Okay, like this year, 2022 is the kind of sorry, this isn't 2022, it's 2023. It does help to know what year you're actually living in. That's a quick, like, tip from the astrology expert. Know what year it is. That's a good way to start. Right. Let me start again. So the kind of year we're in 2023. So the first 3 days or so, 2, 3 days of 2023, we're just coming out of a blue 2 interval. And then we went into the black one. And as of a few days ago, when Venus is, I think, at its greatest elongation today. And just the parameters of the red intervals come very close to the greatest elongations of Venus. This is when Venus is at its greatest distance from the sun. In fact, I might eventually adjust the intervals so that the red intervals really do begin sharp on the greatest western elongation and end at the sharp on the greatest eastern elongation. For the time being, like, that was even a little more complicated for me to do properly. Well, I guess I could have worked a little harder and made it work. These will make the red intervals about a day to 2 days, maybe a day to 3 days shorter than they would otherwise be. Um, People like Napoleon would suddenly not be a red 1 anymore, but a white 5. And I already went into this long thing the other day about Napoleon being a red 1 along with Catherine the Great and Hitler. But I mean, these are the things I need to work with. It just seems to me like, for the time being, as I explained in the video, the red intervals for now are just marked with they're measured by putting the interior conjunction, the Sun Venus conjunction when Venus is retrograde, at the very center of a 146-day period. So it's just calculated according to the number of days. The red and blue intervals are calculated that way, and then the black and white ones can vary. They're an average of 146 days, but they can vary to about 5 days longer or shorter. Not unlike, if you think about our 12-month calendar, the same way that March has 31 days, but February only has 28. I mean, they're not sort of perfectly, they're not perfect lengths. And that's true for the tropical zodiac as well. There are 30 degrees to every sign, but the truth is, the sun's moving much faster when it's going through Capricorn and Aquarius, which is why February does only have 28 days in the month. And the sun's moving much slower in July and August. So technically speaking, if you really averaged it all out, the sun will spend a little more time in Cancer and Leo and less time in Capricorn and Aquarius. And that's something that plays out also into the way the Mars synodic cycle works, because you get a similar sort of feel there. This has to do with their perihelion and aphelion, sections of their cycles, because as Kepler discovered, the orbits of planets are ellipses. They're not perfectly circular. So there are periods in the orbits when Earth or Mars are closest to the sun, and there are periods when they're furthest from the sun. And in both cases, certainly for the sun, I haven't seen this confirmed by anywhere that this is true for Mars, but it has to be true for Mars, because Mars also is, as I've explained a few times, its retrograde cycle in Cancer, Aquarius, and Virgo, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, rather, is very common. They occur in those signs every 15 to 17 years, whereas retrogrades in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces are very rare and can take up to 47 years to reoccur. For instance, in 2018, we had a Mars retrograde in Aquarius, and that was the first time since 1971, 47 years earlier. Or the Mars retrograde we had in Pisces in 2003 was the first one we'd had in that sign since 1956, a 47-year interval again. So yeah, Mars is a little kookier, and I will go into Mars more and more. I know some of you expressed interest in my talking about it, and I will. I just figured I would start off by spending a lot more time on Venus, because I haven't even really unpacked it all. I've been working on that over the course of these live streams, but there still is a lot to say. Now, a few of you have been asking me about having this ephemeris thing that I've made, this file, make it available to you. And I do want to do that. But I just got to figure out how and what I'm going to do in terms of getting it out to people. But what does work, I mean, I do explain the cycle in the intro video, and I do go through which years contained which intervals, and there is a way to just like pause the video where you want and make notes, and at least for the time being, like if you're really desperate, and I get it. I mean, a lot of you are really, really interested in this material, and I'm really sort of overwhelmed with work. Like, the other thing I need to do is go through all these videos and itemize them and customize their summaries and all that stuff. And I apologize. I'll do it as quickly as I can, but I am in a phase of my life where there just are not enough hours in the day. But it will happen. I can, I can promise that much. I have started going through the videos and sort of, I wanted to break them down into little, shorter subject videos. But I'll get all that done as we go along. I just, I hope you'll all be patient. I hope you're enjoying, what I do, even if I'm, sort of slow with some of these other things. I can see Cosmic Rose is also razzing me about the topic title we chatted about. Let's see. Why didn't I make the ABCD sequential? Okay. That's, the thing is, I did. White A to white B to white C to white D to white E. But the thing is, the reason it's split out like this is you have the morning star and the evening star, and actually the white A being diametrically opposed to the black A, um, it makes perfect sense because they begin at the same part of the zodiac pretty much. The black A, or the setting A rather, phase begins halfway through the blue interval with the exterior conjunction, which these days happens it's starting to happen in Libra. Actually, you'll remember last October we had a Sun Venus conjunction. I think, was it at 29 Libra or was it early Scorpio? It gradually moves backward through the signs. And then the red interval, this is where we have the Venus retrograde that goes from Scorpio to Libra, and you get the same, the interior conjunction fairly close, within a couple of degrees of where the exterior one is. And so they sort of follow each other around. Um, and they represent a kind of polarity that's not unlike, somewhat analogous to like the way we think of Aries and Libra as being a polarity, or Capricorn and Cancer. There's some notion of this, that between all these oppositions. So there really is an order. But I know it sort of, it looks like they're scattered, but they're really not. The same thing goes for the intervals. The white 1 is followed by the white 2, followed by the white 3, followed by the white 4. But the numbers look like they're sort of jumbled, like they go backward numerically as they move through the colors. But there isn't a logic to this, a very simple logic that has an elegance. And so, yeah, ultimately the cycle really sort of designed itself. I just had to figure out the best way to express it. It was in August of 2017. They had the Great American Eclipse. I was in Cape Town, South Africa, but that eclipse nonetheless was on my natal Mercury. And even if I couldn't see it the way a lot of you folks could, I felt it. And it was that day, sitting on a couch that we have on our balcony at the house there, and I suddenly realized, yes, I need this wheel with the different colors, and it had been germinating in my mind, but that was the day it sort of came up. And I worked on it and refined it until I came up with this version. There were a few other versions earlier, which always had some flaw that I had to work around until I came up with this really sort of simple and perfect, version that I have now, that I really don't think I can improve upon. But yeah, I'm sorry if anyone's sort of confused at first hand, that it seems things are out of sequence, but really they're not. There's a beautiful sort of symmetry to the whole thing. Okay. Yeah, Vicky's question is sort of ahead of me, way, way, way ahead of me. I'm not. How do I put this? The cycle. I mean, Venus has significations in astrology, and to me, it represents a lot of the stuff that you're learning in whatever other astrology books you're reading, or what other astrologers say about Venus. The cycle is really about timing. It's really about understanding time. I am working out some sort of interpretive qualities to it. Like the thing I've pointed out, how, say, the white 3 interval has a lot of the great songwriters of the 20th century, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, and all those people, or how red 1 intervals, you get these sort of politicians who want to sort of expand territory, like Catherine the Great, Napoleon, and Hitler, and Seward, and all those people I was talking about. So there are these little things that I'm working out, but largely this is about time. Understanding this cycle allows you to look at a person's life relative to these cycles. It's not unlike learning the synodic cycles the way I'm doing them now. It's kind of like if you're learning how to play an instrument. you're not always just like, let's say you're learning how to play piano. It's not just about sort of sitting down and playing a piece on the piano. Some of it involves, to be really, really good, you play scales to a metronome, and it's really sort of rudimentary and not necessarily, it's not about sort of the expression of music or the, it's not about sort of performing music. It's about really having this advanced facility with your instrument. And so if you understand the synodic cycle of Venus and Mars, you can look at any chart and you're like, oh yes, this person, let's say they've got a Leo ascendant, as I do. You look at any chart with someone, anyone comes to you with their chart, or if you're looking at your own chart and you see they have a Leo ascendant, okay, this is someone who always has Venus retrograde cross their ascendant every 8 years. And there's also going to be a superior conjunction every year, at 4 years before and after those retrogrades. And so then you can start to think of their lives in terms of these cycles. And or if you're looking at your own life, chances are you have a Leo rising. If you go back to the summers of, excuse me, if you go back to the summers of 2015, 2007, 1999, 1991, 1983, 1975, 1967, 1959, and so on and so forth, you go back to those summers and you look at those Venus transits. Actually, when you go back that far, it used to happen in Virgo. As I said, it gradually, the red 5 used to happen in Virgo, and now it's happening in Leo exclusively. But the point being, if you understand these cycles, you're looking at someone and you already know when they've been having these particular transits, and yeah, it helps you sort of zoom in and understand the person's life, understand their timeline. So yes, it's like a foundation. It's a bit more technical, but it's not very complicated. So while I am offering some interpretive material here, which I'm in the process of developing, and I'm being very sort of straightforward about that. It's not entirely worked out, and in terms of what these things mean, it's more of just sort of understanding where these things happen. And I promise you, it really it helps you develop your sort of fluidity as a chart reader. It keeps happening for me, for instance, going back to the Mars retrograde and these rare sort of Mars retrogrades. I've had a few clients, well, I mean, these happen time to time, but even just recently, I've had a few clients who had the sun in the first few degrees of Pisces. And you see that and you instantly know, no matter what their chart looks like. You go back to the summer of 2003, when there was that rare Mars retrograde in Pisces, in those early degrees of Pisces, co-present with Uranus, which was also at the time 2003 was the year it made its ingress into Pisces, and it sort of went in and out of Pisces while we had in the summer or in the northern hemisphere, it's the summer. I've lived in Cape Town now, so I have to stop referring to them as seasons. Let's say that, the July-August period when the Mars is retrograde. No matter who the person is, you can pull up that Mars retrograde in Pisces. If they have a sun, if they're born in the last week of February, and they have the sun in the early part of Pisces, I guarantee you that there'll be a story. It'll be really, really central to whatever it is as you're trying to work out the person's life. That summer is just, I have yet to find a person who has the sun in Pisces for whom those transits weren't really, really central to their narrative. Okay, cosmic, the time will come. I don't want to keep talking. I know you want titles, but the time will come. I don't want to keep talking about that. Thank you. I know it's frustrating. I just don't have enough time yet. Someone actually did come up with an AI summary of one of my episodes, which was really useful. And if I can figure out how to do that, and if I can do it all in 20 minutes, that would be great. Otherwise, I have to sort of sit through the whole video and break it down, which I'm already starting to do with the editing process. But I'm sorry if it's frustrating. Just for the time being, if you want to wait until I get that done, I understand, and just sort of tune me out for the time being. Otherwise, you'll just have to put up with me as I'm trying to put up with myself and my schedule that I just don't have enough time for everything yet. Okay, imagine having class where your homework partner studies black D4 while you have white D4. Um, yeah, let's see. Okay. Yeah. No, I know, okay, hopefully I'm not irritating you all. I feel like I'm sort of being not negating. I'm not trying to be negating. Um, okay, Pixie's asking about my personal experience with Venus retrogrades in Leo. I mentioned it before and I found it really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could. Uh, I tend to, I don't mind talking about myself, but I personally, when astrologers are teaching and they refer to their own charts too much, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I know I'm a Leo rising. I'm supposed to be like, all full of myself and just talking about myself constantly. Um, I think there's obviously as astrologers, it's how we get to know each other on a social level is knowing, oh, okay, so and so's a Capricorn with Libra rising or what have you. I liken it to like, if you're a dog owner and you take your dog to the park and the dog runs around with the other dogs and they sniff each other's butts. And the astrologers, when we're sort of sharing our data like that, it's like we're just sort of sniffing each other's butts like dogs do, and getting to know each other a bit, which I think is great. Um, but so much of what I do with astrology has to do with like studying other people. When I was young and I started studying astrology, I had the same experience that most of us do, where it was really enlightening, where I really came to understand myself better and all that stuff. Um, and yeah, see, to the Venus retrogrades in Leo are sort of that they've always been important to me. It was in 1983. It was I was 15 and I got into a relationship that wound up lasting 3.5 years. It was really like until I got married in my late 40s. It was the longest and most serious relationship I was in. Very sort of adult. It was really like being married, even though I was like 15 to 18 in that relationship. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's not that I can go on, but it's not as interesting as a lot of the other people I can talk about. I think. I, I I don't think I'm. I just don't think I'm that interesting. The most interesting thing about me is the things I know about other people. But anyway, that maybe that's just me. Um, okay, let's see. I'm trying to go through all the comments here. Okay, that's all good. Okay. Um, Okay, so Rev Kai is helpful as usual. Not every astrologer has to be a sharer. Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with sharing, but I don't know about you, but like sometimes I find that I encounter some astrologers who just want to talk about their charts, and that starts to it's fine to a degree, um, but I think to really learn astrology, you got to be able to sort of step outside that. Um, anyway, hopefully, I'm not being an ass. Let's I don't, so like I said, sometimes I don't have the best gauge for this. Uh, for when I should sort of tune myself down. All right. Where to go now? I think I was sort of in the middle of, let's go to where we are in the cycle now and talk about this stuff. Um, so here we are. This is the red 5 that we're in as of the other day, when Venus was at 26 Cancer on the 1st of June. We've gone into the red 5 interval. I think it's today that Venus is at its greatest elongation, its greatest distance from the sun. And we're moving towards a Venus retrograde, of course, and an eventual interior conjunction in Leo. And yeah, so if you have angles or planets in Leo, or heck, even if you have like, say, an Aquarius rising, the Leo, the Venus retrograde would cross your descendant, and that's still going to be, very often a really sort of critical transit as well. So if you have that, if you have that Leo sun, that Leo moon, or Aquarius rising, Leo rising, any of those points, even other planets, if they're really sort of crucial in your chart, um, this this cycle, understanding that this period from June to October of 2023, understanding how it connects to June to October of 2015 and 2007, so on and so forth. And you can see it's always a little bit, excuse me, it's always a little bit earlier with every successive return. Like the red 5 in 2007 started on June 6th and ended on October 30th, 0 Leo to 19 Virgo. But then if you go ahead 8 years, now it starts on June 3rd and ends on October 27th. And now it's gone from 28 Cancer to 17 Virgo. So with every successive return, it always occurs about 2 to 3 days and 2 to 3 zodiacal degrees earlier than the previous time, which is why gradually, over centuries, the cycle moves backwards. Some people have asked me, like, how do you connect one sign to a given interval, so on and so forth? And the answer is you don't, because over long periods of time, it shifts. Back in the 1700s, the red 1 retrogrades occurred in Gemini. These days, the red 3 intervals retrogrades occur in Gemini, and the red 1 occurs in Aries going into Pisces. So over the centuries, it moves backward. That's the whole reason of sort of designing this system. Is it's an overlay. It's a different circle than what you get with the zodiac or anything like that. And what was the other thing I was going to say about that? I had another point to make, but it has slipped by me. Okay, so I mean, I get it. Okay. Oh, okay. Some interesting comments. Okay, Ebru says, it was on your midheaven in the summer of 2015 and you closed your company, so it was heartbreaking. One thing that's useful to know, I mean, I'm sorry that happened to you, Ebru. One thing that can be useful, though, is that you don't have a guaranteed positive or negative outcome. It's possible to have like one Venus retrograde, say in Leo, was really terrible, but then 8 years later, something really positive could happen. It's still, you're still looking at how the planet relates to all the other planets. For instance, the Venus retrograde in 2015 was very close to conjunct with Jupiter and Mercury, with a square to Saturn in Scorpio. Whereas the one in 2007, you had Venus with Saturn. Saturn was going from Leo into Virgo, as Venus retrograde was going from Virgo to Leo. Very sort of different outcomes. Certainly for me, the summer of 2007 was really rough, and the summer of 2015 was pretty good. So, just because 2015 didn't quite work out for you, it doesn't mean 2023 won't. But there tends to be some kind of theme that repeats itself. Some sort of, yeah, I mean, it's still, you're still getting a transit of a planet in the same house. So yeah, even if its interaction with all the other planets can mitigate, the actual sort of outcome and circumstances of what the transit represents, there is still something consistent. But don't think just because you've had one bad experience that it's always going to be bad experiences. It's not quite as simple as that. Okay, Elsa X also has an interesting, Sun, Mercury, and Leo in the 11th, and the retrograde periods manifest into periods where your friends feature largely in your life. You're an introvert and usually keep to yourself, but those periods where you sort of where your life gets very social. Yeah, it's the kind that's certainly the how I expect things to sort of play out. And Abru says, okay, she's got Venus retrograde in Aries. So yeah, if you have Venus retrograde in Aries, you don't necessarily need to have natal Venus retrograde in order for the retrograde transit to be really powerful for you. But I think it goes without saying, if you have natal Venus retrograde, then it's, you see the same thing with people who have natal Mercury retrograde. Their experience of the transit of Mercury retrograde is often very different than those of us who were not born during Mercury retrograde. It can be that much stronger. But then, again, it depends, if your Venus is in the 12th house and, not very connected to stuff, then maybe it doesn't have as much power as other things. Okay. Really, Kate quit smoking after 18 years in 2015. Yeah. I was a smoker for 25 years and I quit in 2006. That's how old I am. I had my first cigarette not long before I turned 12. But I didn't become like a pack a day smoker at 12. That happened at about 18. But oh boy, I was really, really into it. Yeah, congratulations on quitting. It's quite an achievement. Um, yeah. I'm trying to think of where to go here. I'm really enjoying the sort of the feedback. Yeah, 39 is a good time to quit, Kate. My feeling about being a smoker was always like when I was, if you do it in your teens, you're cool. If you do it in your 20s, you're edgy. If you do it in your 30s, you're hardcore. If you do it in your 40s, no offense to anyone, but you're kind of pathetic. Or that's how I felt about me. That was my sort of that was how I was 38 when I quit. So yeah, it's about the same age. When you're turning 40, it's just not something you want to keep doing. I know one or two guys who are still smoking like my age, and I'm just like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Anyway, try not to be too judgmental. Okay, so okay, Bliss to be can't remember what they were doing in 2015. Well, maybe you were having such a good time it just flew by. But on reflection, you might, it might come to you what was going on in 2015. Um, oh, okay. Yes, Elsa X is pointing out Kate quit when she was 31. Well, even better. Forget what I said about when I quit. Um, Sonia is saying she quit in 2015 too, and she moved from UK back to Romania with her parents, finished her UK PhD at home, and only went for supervision meetings. Okay. Astro Love has natal Venus in Leo, 26 degrees Leo, 7th house. Well, Astro Love, that's probably, yeah, that puts you right in the bullseye pretty much for where these retrogrades happen these days. So chances are that cyclical relationship you have, that there's something to find. If you know your life's chronology, and this is always important, whether you're learning synodic cycles or not. Astrology really is this calendar system, so you really have to have a sense of where your life was at. Either you've been keeping a journal or a diary, or you like me, you just happen to remember dates really well. Uh, Elsa is saying, "Get ready for X's coming back." Yeah, it's been known to happen sometimes. All things being equal, that's one of the ways. It definitely, if you're someone who's going to have an X come back, the Venus retrograde will be the kind of thing that connects with that. Okay, really interesting feedback. M. Tully is saying she checked their journals, or they checked their journals, let go of a lot of friends who did not understand the experience of taking care of someone with cancer. Yeah, that can be, those are important decisions. I know that I can relate in my own way. Okay, Bliss to be is saying, changing the subject slightly. Can I share my thoughts on the anaretic degree? I'm thinking ahead to Pluto retrograde back in 29 Capricorn in a few weeks. Yeah, there is a sense that when planets are just entering or just leaving a sign, that they're sort of like expressing the qualities associated with that sign in a really sort of exaggerated or concentrated or heightened way. I've seen that play out to some degree. But in terms of my thoughts on that, I mean, it's really just that you're like with Pluto, um, they're going to, we've had one ingress into Aquarius, and there's still going to be two more. Like it's going to regress back into Capricorn, and then I think in October it goes back into Aquarius, if I remember correctly, and then it's going to eventually station retrograde and go back into Capricorn once more. I think around the spring of 2024, if I remember correctly, and it's only till sort of later in 2024 it makes its final ingress into Aquarius, where it'll stay until it eventually makes its ingress into Pisces, whenever that is. Off the top of my head, the human ephemeris isn't sort of looking forward as much as he looks back. So I I don't have I think I did have it memorized a few weeks ago, but it slipped my mind. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Keeping a diary definitely helps. Um, oh, yeah. Michelle's bringing up something important. Perfections. This is great. Thank you, Michelle. That's a really good jump off point. Now, the way the perfection cycle, if you will, overlaps with the Venus synodic cycle. The Venus synodic cycle, of course, is multiples of 8. The perfection cycle involves a cycle of 12 years, more precisely than say the cycle of Jupiter, which is 11 and whatever. And because of this, let's say whenever Venus is retrograde in Leo, if you're in, for the sake of argument, in a Leo perfection year this year, and Venus is going retrograde in Leo, what it means is that back in 2015, you would have been in an Aries perfection year. And then back in 2007, you would have been in a Sagittarius perfection year. And then in 1999, that would have been the last time you were in a Leo perfection year. It's always going to be in the same element, and it'll just, rotate backwards around the triangle. If it's, a fire sign, it'll be all 3 fire signs. If it's an earth sign, it'll be all 3 earth signs. My birthday's in the middle of the retrograde because I'm a Leo. So let's see right now, how old am I? I'm 54 going on 55. That's right. I'm in an Aquarius perfection year going into a Pisces perfection year. So no matter what, it's always my birthday during the Leo retrogrades has always gone from an earth sign to a water sign in the perfection cycle. And it's really useful to sort of connect that and have a sense of that right away. Okay, I'm just getting a sense of... All right. The interaction in chat is really great. I almost feel I don't need to jump in because you're interacting with each other so well that maybe I just sort of comment on what you're saying. Let's see. How can I'm going to put this over to the side so that you guys are looking at the intervals the same time that I'm looking at chat, because it's probably not super helpful. And if I can at least keep these up, you can look at them and get a sense of them. Is there anyone who still doesn't know what interval they're born under? Is this because people have been asking me that, because I'm not providing the ephemeris just yet, to everyone's obvious frustration. But is there anyone who wants me to sort of double check what interval they were born under, or has everyone already sort of figured it out despite my my being difficult with you all? Pixie, you don't know your interval. Okay, what's your date of birth, Pixie? And Evan, you also don't know? Okay, if you don't know, okay, so February 20th, 1960. That is going to be a white 4, I believe. Yeah, there we are. White 4 began November 13th, 1959, and it ended April 10th, 1960. Evan, February 9th, 81. That's probably going to be a blue 1. Yeah, the blue 1 began January 24th, 1981, and it ended June 19th, 1981. How do you check this? You just tell me your date of birth, and then I tell you. Jack's ready, December 23rd, 1977. That's going to be a blue 4. The blue 4 started November 10th, 1977, and it ended April 5th, 1978. That blue 4 also has a Mars retrograde in Leo occur right, I think, on Christmas Day. So just after you were born, Jax, there's also a Mars retrograde in Leo, along with being in this blue 4 interval. A lot of people in the news these days who are born in this particular blue 4 interval. They include um, Donald Trump Jr., but also Emmanuel Macron and Volodymyr Zelensky. So yeah, that blue 4 is out in the world these days. That 77, 78 blue 4. Let's see who else needs me to. Pixie. May 24th, 1996. You are a red 3. You are definitely a red 3. The red 3, of course, is so you've probably got Venus retrograde. The red 3 began on March 29th, 1996, and it ended August 22nd, 1996. Very cool. Let's see. Is anyone else asking about their? Okay, I'm getting more and more hits. Yeah, Ebru, your red one, 21st of March, 1969. That's right. River of Winds, June 22nd, 1965, is either going to be a blue 1 or maybe a white 5. Let's see. A blue 1 2 days before it went into a black 5. The blue one ended on June 24th, and you're June 22nd. Okay. Pixie, yeah, Venus retrograde in Gemini and also out of bounds. That's right. I mean, Venus usually is out of bounds when it's going from Gemini to Cancer. So that red 3 Venus, yeah, very often is out of bounds. The same was true. The red 2 Venus used to be out of bounds when it was going from Capricorn to Sagittarius. Now it's in Scorpio going into Libra, so it's not the same. Kate, February 7th, 1984. So that is going to be a black 4. No, I'm sorry, white 4. What am I saying? I screwed up. White 4. The white 4 began November 6th, 1983, and it ended April 3rd, 1984. So yeah, white 4. And Tavian Watts, November 29th, 2000. Yes, you are a black 2 setting B. That's absolutely right. Fun fact, American elections, of course, occur on 4-year intervals. So every presidential election, that is, they always occur during white 2 or black 2 intervals. And that becomes a sort of interesting thing to note, especially when you go to like other parts of the election cycle, often involve Venus retrogrades. For instance, the white 2 elections, like the 2016 was a white 2 election. 2016. Wait a minute. No, 2016 was a black 2 election. 2020 was a white 2. The white 2 elections, like 2020, they always follow the red 3 interval, and this is often where it'll be in the red 3 interval where the candidates are confirmed for their party, and then the election happens during the white 2. And this red 3, think of like Reagan in 1980. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Clinton's reelection. A lot of the like those 2-term presidents, Clinton's reelection, Bush's, W's reelection in 2004, and Obama's reelection in 2012. Those were all white 2 interval elections that had, really intense red 3 periods leading up to the election. And then when you get the black 2 elections, like 2016 was, 2016, I kind of went into this with Trump. So the 2016 election was a black 2, but Trump had announced his campaign during the red 5 when Venus was retrograde on his ascendant. I put that chart up, I think, a couple of live streams ago. And the red 5 is, tends to be really big for Trump. He previous, like in 99, he announced a campaign then during a red 5. His father died during a red 5. You can really go into the weeds and find that one being powerful, as you would expect it to be, because he's a Leo rising. So yeah, even if it's, remember, you don't have to, like someone. You don't have to be their stan in order to sort of follow their astrology. In fact, I think it's pretty important to, also follow the astrology of people that figures you don't like. Let's see, an interesting parallel elections to the taking of office ceremonies. Yeah. I'll get to that in a second, Jennifer. It's even more interesting than you can imagine. Sarah Fruman, January 19th, 1990, is a red 4. That's also Venus going retrograde from Aquarius to Capricorn in those days. And Cosmic Rose, August 6, 1967, is a red 5. That was a Venus retrograde in Virgo in those days. And July 12th, 1949 would be a black 5, which is an interesting one. I want to talk about black 5 sometime. And Astrolove, September 28th, 1983, is a red 5 as well. Because September 28th, 1983 is 16 years after August 6, 1967. So you can see that red 5 sort of repeating itself there. Okay, modern Goldilocks, yeah, it happens in your moon, Jupiter in 11th house. They always correspond to work. July 2nd, 1982 is... July 2nd, 1982 is a white 3. That girl from yonder is saying, am I looking at the YouTube chat? No, I'm looking at the Restream chat, which gives me the YouTube chat, or at least it's supposed to be giving me the YouTube chat. Are you all chatting with me on YouTube? Is that, I don't even know. I hope you are. I hope I know what I'm doing. I think I'm reading the YouTube chat, but I'm reading it on the Restream live stream. Okay, yes, YouTube. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I am reading the YouTube chat. I'm just not reading it on YouTube. It gets transferred over to Restream, which is what I thought I was doing it. December 10th, 88 is white 2. White 2 interval. And Michelle had a question earlier. A question for later. I've read the Venus synodic cycle is considered to begin at the interior conjunction, and the exterior conjunction is the culmination of this cycle. Does yours have a start and end? That's an excellent question. I think, the real answer is, like, it's a perpetual start and end. You can choose any point to be a starting point. I'll tell you, I mean, I guess, like, I start my cycle the way I designed it. I start it with the rising A white 1 interval. But that's kind of arbitrary. The reason it started there, originally I was starting it with the red 1, but then I realized sequentially, the white 1 starts with, like, pure morning star, and then the blue 4 starts with, like, morning star but closer to the sun. And then the black interval is like evening star, and then the red interval is even, like, sort of further from the sun. So there's a sort of sequence if you go from white to blue to black to red. Remember, this goes counterclockwise the way like the orbit of Venus itself. So going from white to blue to black to red, that was something I realized later. That was a better sort of starting order. The reason I started with red 1 originally is that's where the Venus retrograde in Aries happens these days, right? But like I explained, back in the 1700s, the red 1 happened in Gemini, and it was actually the red 4 that happened in Aries. So it's always sort of moving around. The numbers and letters don't have any sort of, symbolic relevance at all. I just, I wanted to be able to identify them. Most people know the difference between a number 1 and a number 3 and a number 5. And if you know that and you know your colors, boom, you got it. And like I said, it's really just it's a matter of being able to identify sections of the cycle. And so, this way they're identified by color, which tells you what sort of phase, what part of the phase they're in. And then the numbers just tell you, oh, yes, that's the one that happens in this section of the zodiac these days, or that section. Um, but I mean, you want to go to the planet and the sign to do all that sort of interpretive work mostly. Um, let's see. Okay, Sarah, you're asking the same question people are asking me a lot. For the time being, eventually I do want to make this stuff available to everyone. I just got to figure out how to do it properly, in a way that's satisfying for everyone. So for the time being, it's really just coming to my live streams or watching the introduction to the Venus synodic cycle video, and maybe pausing the video here and there so that you can sort of get a sense of where everything happens. I think that's really the best I can offer for the time being. That girl from yonder is asking January 25th, 1987. I'm pretty sure that's a red 2. 87 started with a red 2. Yeah. Oh, no, it's a bit too late. Sorry. It's a white 1. By 1987, the white 1 was starting on January 17th. If you go back a few cycles, it goes as far back as January 25th. So white 1 for you, that girl from yonder. Not too long after the red 2. So it's a morning star. Very bright morning star. Not too long after the greatest elongation either. Venus retrogrades work with my country's chart, Turkey's chart. This can be a whole webinar. Yeah, it squares natal Venus and Jupiter. Just a note. I've done some work with Turkey and the history of Turkey, although I still have a lot more to do. One thing that I find interesting is that here, I'm just going to pull the chart up. I didn't realize I had this. I think I have a lot of work to do on Turkey, especially modern Turkey. I've been studying the Ottoman Empire, but Ataturk. Do I not have Ataturk? Maybe I don't. There's a good reason I don't, because Ataturk didn't know his real birthday. He has. Yeah, this is not uncommon in the Muslim world. Birthdays aren't always recorded, or they're recorded after the birth. It's more like a registration of the date, and it's not necessarily the actual date of birth. Right. So his chart isn't certain. But what's interesting about Ataturk is he chose a red 1 interval as his sort of symbolic birthday. I'm trying to remember the exact day. Oops, I got to prove I'm not a robot to Google. Here he is. Right, 1881. So it's suspected he's born in 1881, but he gave himself sort of an official birthday, which I think is like May. I want to say May. I'm sure he did. It's not marked here. But he assigned himself a birthday, and he chose a red 1, sort of, that works for him, which is also funny, not to make an unkind comparison with Ataturk, but someone else who says 4th of January, 1881. I'm sure it's later. I thought it was like April or May of 1881. I don't remember seeing 4 January 1881. Because 4 January 1881, I think, would be a black 2, not a red 1. I remember him having a red 2. A red 1, rather. But Saddam Hussein of Iraq also didn't know his date of birth, but also gave himself a sort of an official birthday that's a red 1. And I find it interesting that these leaders choose nominal birthdays that wind up being red 1 intervals. Ataturk died during a red 2 interval, and that's the one that I think we're talking about. I'm not sure if I have the chart for his death. I don't, but he died in November of 1938, which is a red 2. And the Ottoman Empire was also abolished during a red 2 before the country was sort of officially founded. And then the treaty between Turkey and the Soviet Union that sort of normalized relations between them. This was a red 1, and that red 1 really plays into so much stuff Red 1 and Red 2 seem to be really, really strongly connected to events, various events in Turkish history. Um, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you're seeing March 12th, 1881 Ebru. That's the date I've seen, and that puts him in the red one. That's what I was talking about. And the 10th of November, 1938. Yeah, that's a red two. Um, that's right. For those of you who are talking about Ariel Gutman's book, really useful book. Um, and I haven't read Adams. I had a couple of conversations with Adam Gainsbourg about the cycle of Venus. Um, Yeah, Ariel's book is good, but she really does just sort of focus on the Kazemi points, whereas I'm sort of I'm presenting the whole cycle and giving you the means to understand uh, all the sort of facets of the cycle. Very much the Kazemis are sort of like lunations, if you will, or we regard them in the same way that we regard lunar relations, only they have to do with Venus's relationship with the sun. So if you wanted to sort of understand the distinction between what Ariel's doing and what I'm doing, is it would be like if we were talking about the moon instead of Venus, she would be talking about just new moons, and I would be talking about all the facets of the lunar cycle. Which is not to say that I mean, I think her material is really strong, and it in many many ways it corresponds to what I'm doing. There isn't really much contradiction. It's just sort of a different way of contextualizing it all. And yeah, when you're studying astrology, you definitely want to drink from more than one well. Um, that's just that was one of the first things I realized, that you don't want to just learn astrology from one person. You need as many sources as you can. I'm old enough that I've talked about this a bit before, but just to sort of, at the risk of repeating myself, um, I started studying astrology in 1995, and in '97 I went to New York to study with the NCGR. And it was literally the first day I ever discovered the internet was the first day I arrived in New York City in February of '97. So I studied with a bunch of different teachers in New York, and these were the days when NCGR teachers were teaching out of their apartments in New York City. So you had proper classes, and there was the social aspect, but also you had that sort of hands-on learning. And the great thing about New York in the '90s was there were dozens of really good astrology teachers in New York City. It was a really great place to be, and so that was a really wonderful resource to just pick that many people's brains and learn a bunch of stuff. And so yeah, I don't see Ariel and myself as being in competition at all. Uh, Maybe when I do publish a book, then we're competing for book sales, but that's kind of beside the point. The material, I think, they complement each other. What she's doing, what I'm doing, and it's definitely a book worthwhile reading. My sense of Adam's book is Adam really just tends to be way more esoteric than I am. If you're really sort of strongly esoterically minded, I think I'm still a worthwhile teacher for you, but I'm not the well that you're going to drink from to get your sort of esoteric fix. I'm really sort of, yeah, I call myself exoteric astrology. This is just sort of a bit more, whatever. It's not as, I don't use a lot of esoteric jargon or language. I think that's the main thing. Some of it is just style. Um, let's see. What are some of my favorite references for this, Nick? For what? Uh, for Venus? If you're talking about Venus, I mean, a lot of it I worked out myself. I mean, I had all the intervals sort of worked out, and I'd done all this research. By the time I saw Ariel's book, let's see. Yeah, October of 2016, my wife and I went to the ESAR conference in LA, or just outside LA, and Ariel was there, and we bought a copy of her book and brought it back to South Africa. So that was the first time I saw it. And I was already, really far along in my work. Like I said, I designed the intervals not too long after, but that wasn't at all sort of inspired by what Ariel's doing. Um, but in terms of like what I've gleaned from studying lives with the Venus cycle, and what I saw written in her book, I thought it was, Yeah, I didn't see anything where I was like, "Oh, no, that's all wrong." It was like, "Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm seeing in my own way." So yeah, definitely worth, sort of studying us all. Um, Expanding with hoopla, maybe that's the wrong word. Yeah, that's probably the wrong word, although I think I know what you mean. Sometimes you can use the wrong word, but I can sort of psychically extract what I think you meant by that. But hoopla is probably wrong. Um, okay, yeah. Oh, modern Goldilocks. You think you're a blue three. Did you, if you want, you can give me your date of birth and I can confirm or deny that you're a blue three. I'm a blue three. I'm a blue three setting B, um, you know, for what it's worth. Um, oh, well, great grandparents. That's awesome. Um, I knew my great grandparents when I was very young. All right, just catching up here. Oh yeah, learning the technical first before intuitive-ish. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I liken the kind of work I'm doing here, where if June 2685. I'll look that up while I'm saying. The kind of work we're doing here is a bit more like, doing the exercises in your piano book rather than sort of performing for Elise or whatever it is you perform on the piano. So we are doing sort of, it's not so much about leaping into performance here, but just sort of analyzing and practicing, getting to know the ephemeris in this other way. Because, like I said, if you understand the cycle, there's just 8 kinds of years. If you catch my drift, um, 2023 is the same kind of year as 2015. It began pretty much with the same interval. It ends pretty much with the same interval. And once you get that pattern, then it's a cinch to remember, any year of the 20th century, the 19th century, so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, it's not the kind of fix that you get where you're just interpreting everything, but I think that part of astrology does need that. June 2685, is that a white five? Yes, the white five in 1985 began on June 15th. So yes, that is a white five. What phase is January 6th, 2021? That was a white 2. Yeah, that was a white 2. That girl from yonder is asking, any notable events or people during white 1? Well, Michelle Ibarra. That was the trouble we got into the other day, when I just talked about the most horrible people who were born under white ones without giving him any any positive examples. Um, Here I can open this up and let's look at white one together. I'll It'll take me a minute to download it. All right, there it is. That'll take a few minutes and then I'll open up that and look at it. Um, Working with people or clients, the intuitive doesn't really count until you actively engage the client or patient. In my case, this is probably why most astrologers engage the client in readings. Um, yeah, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, intuition has to. Usually, I think I know what you mean. Like when you're actually speaking to someone, you get some sense that your intuitive scanning mechanism can actually sort of engage with something as opposed to being entirely abstract. I never know, when people book an appointment with me and I look at the chart, I might, I know their age and probably their gender. Although occasionally I'm wrong about that because someone's got a name that's unisexual, and I've made the wrong presumption. Not that it is going to matter, but yeah, once you're speaking to a person, you have a bit more context. Then yeah, it's easier to sort of tune into them that way. But the abstraction of astrology still, when I prepare a chart, I'm still thinking about, okay, this cycle works this way in this person's life. They had their Saturn return in such and such year, and so on and so forth. Oh, Elsa's in Auckland. Okay, right on. I'm glad to have people from the global South following me. Like I said, I lived in South Africa for 6 years. I still kind of live there. So it's helped me. I used to always say like the the spring equinox and the fall equinox, and now I just have to say the March equinox and the September equinox. I've had to really sort of make that adjustment. I cultivated some bad habits, being such a northern focused person. Okay. So let's see where my white one slide. Whoops, that's not it. Where's my keynote? Okay, so my white one is, there we are. Okay. So this is for that girl from yonder. Cosmic Rose says, thanks for the chuckle, Nick. Furry Leaves was my first recital piece. Yeah, so is my stepdaughter. And one time, just here in Montreal in the mountain, there was a free piano, like, those street pianos, and anyone can sort of sit down and play. And my wife and I were goading my stepdaughter to go play Furry Lees, because it's the piece that she often plays when she practices. But like 2 people before her also played Furry Lees. It was like, it turned into some like Furry Lees competition rather. Yeah, Elsa X says they are still Capricorn and Cancer equinoxes. Well put. Okay, so for that girl from yonder, we're just going to look at some white one births, and I'm also going to pull up some white one events. And yeah, we'll just see what we find. So if I go really far back to my whole, who I've worked out so far, goes back to Martha Washington was a white one. George Clinton, not the Parliament Funkadelic guy, but the 4th Vice President of the USA. We got the funk, gotta have the French Revolutionary, anarchist Klutz. Poor guy wound up, he made the mistake of being German in the French Revolution and wound up on the guillotine. Harriet Beecher Stowe, the great abolitionist author. This dude who's like an associate justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Queen Victoria. I won't go to every single person. Queen Victoria was a white one. Lenin's mother. Oh yes, the dastardly King Leopold II of Belgium. As I was telling Michelle, this is where the banter with Michelle got a little dark, because this guy is probably the most evil man of the 19th century, which is really, 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 really saying something. Yeah, look up Belgian Congo 19th century, and you get a sense of just how, just the worst, really the worst. No one in the Confederacy was as bad as this guy, as bad as they were. Not even close. He's really, really awful. Charles Bonaparte, who's the nephew of Napoleon, he was U.S. Secretary of the NASA. That's not right. Of the Navy. That was a misspell. A rather unfortunate one. He was the Attorney General under Theodore Roosevelt, and he founded the department that went on to become the FBI, known as the FBI. Anyway, he was a U.S. Attorney General. So yeah, I've got various sort of other Supreme Court justices, scientists. This is Pierre Curie, the husband of Marie Curie. Another, I remember Queen Victoria was a white one. This is the wife of George V. She was actually German. She was born in Kensington Palace, but she's actually German and spoke English with a German accent. But she was sort of the most sort of royal ever. She was, compensated for her Germanness during the First World War by being super, super British, kind of like what Catherine the Great did in Russia. Catherine the Great was also German, but just made sure she was like more Russian than anyone. And Queen Mary is also sort of an example of that. Who else do I have here? King Albert the First of Belgium. So yeah, Belgium's worst and, let's say, best kings were both white one intervals. Just goes to show they can be terrible people, they can be good people. Um, yeah, if you know Korean history, the first president of South Korea was a white one. Pierre Laval, the French traitor in the Second World War. Earl Warren, another Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice. He was also, of course, the Warren Report on the JFK assassination was named after him, although it probably should have been called the Dulles Report. Max Ernst, the painter. Morgenthau, who was Secretary of the Treasury under Roosevelt. Beria, this is another monster, a white one monster. Yeah, all kinds of people. Let's see. Orson Welles, Billie Holiday, Henry Kissinger, James Dean, Gorbachev, Daniel Ellsberg, the whistleblower in the Pentagon Papers, Ray Manzarek of The Doors, who kind of looks like Peter Fonda of Easy Rider. You get a lot of these cool guys, Peter Fonda, James Dean. Later on, you get people like, Angus Young and Ron Wood, Iggy Pop, there's Harvey Keitel, Marvin Gaye. So you get these really cool guys, and then you get these like super uncool guys like former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Actually, at one point, Canada had a whole bunch of white one prime ministers. We had Mulroney and Clark as a white one, and Kim Campbell as a white one. So there was this period in Canadian history where like three successive prime ministers were, nearly successive. Three successive conservative Canadian prime ministers were born in white one intervals. And speaking of super uncool guys, we get like Mitt Romney, Dan Quayle. I mean, how uncool could you get? John Roberts. This Russian loser, their current minister of defense, will probably get pushed out of a window any day soon. So what the observation I have about the white one intervals is they're like either like really, really cool people or really sort of uncool. There's something about, and cool is kind of a silly word to use, but hopefully you guys know what I mean. Even Kissinger, who I think is just a monster, to give him credit, for someone who's, sort of a career politician guy, he was the guy who was like dating Barbara Streisand and, escorting her to things and stuff. And dating, there was another actress, the redhead from one of the James Bond movies that he was pretending to date. Anyway, he's sort of like, even though he's a total dick and a monster, he had a bit more flair than your average politician. And white one events, just quickly. Hopefully I haven't this is very eye-opening, very, very eye-opening. All right, that girl from yonder, I'm glad to know. Leo 2 was awful. Yes, he was. Oh, Vicky has a very interesting suggestion. Anna Lovelace, the only legitimate daughter of Lord Byron, the great English poet. She invented the first computer and died on November 27th, 1852. Yes, I am familiar with, it's Ada, not Anna Lovelace. Funny enough, my wife's name is Anna and she spells it with one N like that, but it's Ada Lovelace. I think I have her birthday. Byron file. I'm definitely, yeah, I've got her in there. December 10th, 1815. Where's my Byron file? I have a lot of work to do on my Byron file, but I've got a couple of biographies of her and I've read them. There we are. Okay, so Ada Byron, December 10th. Oh, yes, we do have a birth time. So that's Ada Byron, who, yeah, she was a very skilled mathematician. There's a guy named Charles Babbage who was trying to sort of build the first computer, and he only got so far. But Ada Byron was really crucial in terms of her facility with mathematics in helping to develop those ideas and sort of, take what Babbage was doing and make it work a little more. Yeah, so she's a mega Sagittarius there. Excuse me. You can see she was born 22 days after Mars went direct. So this Mars, she's not just like an Aries rising with the moon in Aries. This Mars, you see how far it is from the sun. This is how you know that Mars would have just made a station not too long. Mars generally makes its stations when it's between like a trine and let's call it a quincunx, for want of a better word, distance from the sun. So it'll either be like, if the sun's in Sagittarius, if you see Mars in Aries or Taurus, it's got to be really close to its direct station. And indeed it is. And her Venus was 37 days stationing direct. 37 days after it's stationed direct. So let's see what's 1815. What is she? I'm drawing a blank here. Oh, of course, the red 5 went that late in those days. Yeah, that's just that's see that these days the red 5's in Leo. But Ada Lovelace was a red 5 with, Venus and Scorpio. The direct station had happened in Libra. So yeah, she's a red 5. And both her Venus and her Mars are really, really close to their direct stations, which means they're moving slowly. This is the thing. The other thing that you get from learning the synodic cycles is it helps you appreciate the speed that planets, are transiting under currently. And that's what you get out of this looking at this chart this way. If Venus is 37 days after its direct station, Mars is just 22 days after its direct station. They're both moving very slowly. Venus is starting to accelerate gradually. It's maybe moving a bit faster, a month after its station, but still moving fairly slowly. That Mars is moving really slow. That Mars is really moving the speed of at least a Saturn, if not a Uranus or Neptune. So that really slow, and that's part of the sort of the power that planets have. The slower they're moving, this is why the outer planets do what they do. That sort of slow motion they have, and it's a real mistake to just think that Mercury, Venus, and Mars are always just fast moving planets. It's true they do circumambulate their rotation around the sun. It happens faster than the other planets because they're closer, but they have such varying speeds, and any of them can be moved, virtually standing still if you're close enough to the station, or in fact standing still, but geocentrically speaking. And then you really have a planet that's got the power of any of those outer planets, that's got that same force, and this is one of the reasons that you do want to sort of get the Venus and Mars synodic cycles memorized in your mind, because that's part of what you're uncovering here is it's giving you a means to track the speed, the varying speed of Venus or Mars or Mercury, and that's part of what makes it so valuable. I'm not sure if there was something specific. Okay, you're asking to do like a chart analysis of Anna Lovelace. Yeah, I want to do more of like I said here, I'll show you my Kindle library. It'll take a minute to open there, but I do have more work I want to do with Ada Lovelace. Yeah, you claim her for the club. Okay, well, I don't have a Venus book yet. For the time being, I've got that introduction video on my YouTube channel. I'm working on other videos, but I really want to do a really good job on them. But I don't have a book yet. I have these live streams where you can interact with me, and I will make more and more videos. I move at the speed I move. I know, like, one thing, I'm glad you guys are really enjoying what I do, but I am kind of slow in getting stuff out because I try to be very careful in my work. Obviously, I also have limited time. I give readings for a living, and I have a family. So there's other things that sort of, I do put my all into my work, but there's only so many hours in the day. Cosmic Rose. Oh yes, you're bringing up the alarms for the broadcast. Um, I do usually this stream, the Sunday stream. I usually do in a joint, team stream with Patrick Watson. As I explained at the beginning of this episode, that Patrick's daughter turned 12 today, and so he's off doing his daddy thing. I'm a dad too, so this happens. Family first and all. But Watson will be back for future team streams. I do a solo stream. I've been doing solo streams on Monday and Friday, but I'm thinking I'm going to drop the Friday because it always seems to be a bit off for me. I seem to really enjoy the Monday stream, and then the Friday stream seems to be sort of more frustrating. And I don't think I need to do them 3 times a week. 2 times a week is probably enough for considering my schedule, and that frees me up to do other things that some of you really want me to do, like itemize the videos and all the other stuff that folks are asking me to do. And these days I'm starting them at 2 p.m. But that'll stick for the time being. Oh yeah, Kissinger, power is the strongest aphrodisiac. Yeah, he's kind of a vile person, but I think he's not wrong about that. I was just going to take you down to my library here because I know I have a couple of books about Ada. Yeah, Ada's Algorithm. This is a book I have read. It's more of a sort of sciencey book about Ada Lovelace and what she did. I read it a few years ago, so I'm not, the details are a bit sort of fuzzy after a few years. But I'm going to go through this book again and sort of add as many dates from it into my file on Ada as I can. I'm very interested in Babbage, and then there's another book I have here somewhere. It's about Ada and her mother, so it's more personal. That one book is more sort of like sciencey. I just can't remember the title, so I can't search for it. It doesn't have Ada in the title. I'll just do a quick scan. These are my science books and astrology books that I have on Kindle. If I don't see it right away, I won't dwell on it. Let's see here. It's going to be a cover with 2 women on the cover. I don't seem to be finding it. Okay. Well, yeah, anyway, I have that one book that's sort of sciencey, and then I have this other book that's the relationship of Ada and her mother, which was obviously complicated. Lord Byron, the great poet, not such a great husband or father, sort of the opposite of. But yeah, he's this, really sort of he's the kind of guy who was already a legend when he was still alive, but he died. There we are. This is the book, In Byron's Wake. That's it. And so this is a book about Ada and her mother and sort of how they survived, with having such a heavy duty legacy as having, Lord Byron as a husband / father. So that's one I look forward to reading, and I'll incorporate into the file. So yeah, eventually what I'll do is make I want to make a bunch of these biographical videos, and with synodic cycles and other facets of astrology. And Ada Byron is exactly the kind of person I would want to cover. I would probably do it in a broad story that also involved Charles Babbage, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley. I love groups and looking at charts, and it's not a matter of just looking at one individual person and the transits they have, but the whole context of the world they live in, the people around them, and the people they're connected to, their friends, their enemies, their family, getting these really sort of rich stories. And there's definitely a good one in there. Byron wound up going to Greece when the Greek Revolution broke out, and he's a really sort of important figure there for that. So there's, it even pulls in my favorite topic to study with astrology, which is revolution, and Ada has a tangential connection to that. Ada's mother was a witch. Okay, yeah, I think I remember seeing that. Let's see. Yeah, she was friends with Charles Dickens. Okay, Venus and Mars tell a tale. Oh, that girl from yonder. Do I offer personal readings related to the Venus synodic cycles? Yeah, absolutely. The cycles of Venus and Mars are, very often in consultations, are a central part of what I do. It's not I don't give people readings just on the synodic cycles. I do horoscopic astrology readings that involve secondary progressions and annual perfections with solar returns and all kinds of things like that. But the synodic cycles always sort of play into pretty much any chart I read for. And then if someone has just sort of specific questions about it, and that's part of what we do at the hour. Um, the way I do consultations is I charge for my time. There's a flat fee for 1 hour. I don't offer. I know a lot of astrologers will say, well, you can uh, get this, you can get a horary reading for this amount of money or a electional for this kind of money. And I just sort of I do these 1 hour sessions. I don't do a lot of horary really, so I don't offer. It can come up. I know how to do them. I've done them, but they're not a central part of my practice. But whatever people want to talk about when they book me, it's their hour. So we can go into the nitty gritty of looking at their past and how synodic cycles have played out in their lives, or maybe they have sort of very immediate concerns like, what do I do with my problems this year? And yeah, sometimes the synodic cycles can also come in and help the way astrology often can, either help you make the best choices for yourself considering the circumstances, or if you're under some sort of situation where you don't have a lot of control over the outcome, at the very least you get some sort of understanding and helps you sort of plan your way through the future. um, okay, well, that's great. I'm generally available. My website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com, and it's easy to book a consultation with me. My website isn't super fancy. I know a lot of astrologers have much nicer websites than me, but nonetheless, it seems to work generally speaking. Maybe some people see my website and go, "Ooh, forget this guy," but hopefully not. I suspect sometimes it does happen, but it is easy to book a session with me if you're interested. Everything can be done automatically on my website, and it's always welcome. I love to do it. I love being. I can tell you, folks. Like this past year has just been my favorite year so far in my sort of professional life. My life as an astrologer. It's been so rewarding. This sort of new generation of astrology students who are so well informed and so serious, and it just makes the conversations that much more interesting. Um, as a working astrologer, not I never moaned about it, but it's never a problem. But I used to get more sort of just regular everyday people with regular everyday problems, which is all well and good. But obviously, I enjoy the work a lot more when I'm talking to someone who already has some level of astrological knowledge and can banter with me at a sort of at a more at a deeper level. Definitely the more the more I can sort of engage with you. So that also is something I really like. But yeah, I read for anyone who comes my way and thinks I'm worth their time. Um, right. Okay. Well, that was fun. Ada was a great little suggestion. I'm glad she came up. She is kind of an interesting figure. Obviously, there were not a lot of women mathematicians back in the 19th century, let alone ones who were, the lone child of a legendary poet. I mean, it's hard to even get across just like who Byron was, in his lifetime as he died. Lily Langtry, I think I have somewhere. I do a lot of British stuff. If I don't, I can look into her. No, I don't. Okay. I'll have to get to her. She certainly has come up in a lot of my reading. But yeah, Byron was like a rock star, and that really hadn't. They sometimes talk about who was the first sort of celebrity or rock star, but There is something to Byron's notoriety that really was unprecedented. There's a bit of a sort of, I don't know, Jim Morrison, Mick Jagger, guys like that. Byron was sort of that kind of figure, just absolutely legendary, uh, and really controversial, because he was very accomplished poet. But something of a something of a perv at the same time. Well, definitely, he got around. The ladies loved him, and the guys loved him too. Actually, he was, he didn't he was sort of omnisexual, it seems. Um, but yeah, very really really interesting figure. Obviously, a great writer, and just an interesting circle of people. Like I said, I really enjoy looking at groups of people in astrology. So the fact that it's not just Byron, it's also Percy and Mary Shelley and all the other people around them who aren't necessarily as talented, but also sort of interesting and part of the part of that sort of grander narrative. Right. Anyone else have any requests of charts I can sort of look at while I'm here? Was Byron sort of like a Hemingway figure? I'd say different from like Hemingway is really sort of macho and about wars and this Spanish Civil War, First World War, and bullfighting and uh, guy with his junk shot off who was in love with a girl. Um, yeah, Hemingway I think of as being like super macho masculine, whereas Byron is uh yeah, really not. He's a stud, but he's he's like I said, if you bisexual almost is too mild a term for Byron. I like omnisexual, it seems. Um, and yeah, just a very sort of different figure than Hemingway. But there is a notoriety. I guess like both of them had a sort of most writers are only notorious when they die, but you could say Byron and Hemingway were sort of celebrities while they were alive. I guess there's a similarity there. That girl from yonder is asking a great question. Okay, I see Lana Del Rey and Joe Strummer. I'll get to them in a minute. But Stalin died actually during a red one, not a white one, and it's an interesting thing. Oh, I see, because you saw this slide here. These are just all the white, these are red ones, white ones, black ones, and blue ones that I have in event files. But since you bring it up, Stalin died during a red one, but so did Hitler, and so did Franklin Roosevelt, and Mussolini. I don't have him here, but he also died during a red one. So Stalin died 8 years after these other, after the end of the Second World War. You can see, but it was 8 years later, and it was a red one. And this thing with Russians and red ones is, red one is just all over Russian history. If you go back, like, okay, this is Stalin's death in 53, the famous sort of the trials, the show trials where Stalin executed all his generals, including this guy Tukhachevsky. This was 8 years before the Second World War during a red one. And if Hitler's going to invade your country, maybe you don't want to shoot all your generals, just before it happens. But that's what he did, and one of the reasons Russia almost didn't win that battle. What else is Russia red one? Trotsky got exiled to Constantinople. And then before that, there was, the Kronstadt rebellion. This is the end of the Russian Civil War. Trotsky sort of took out these rebelling sailors on Kronstadt, which is an island, a naval island just off just not far from St. Petersburg. You can see it from St. Petersburg. So this is like the end. Keep in mind, like Russia went to war in 1914. But Russia's war didn't end in 1918 like the rest of Europe. The Paris peace talks in 1919. Russia kept going. They had the Bolshevik Revolution was still going on, so they got into a civil war with the anti-Bolshevik forces, and then they got into a war with Ukraine and Poland. The war with Poland was really intense, and that went into 1920. And eventually, in this period, in this red one in 1921, is when all this sort of settled down. They signed, all their treaties with with Poland, with the West, with Turkey. As I showed earlier, this all happens in this red one as they finally sort of extricate themselves from war. Um, and then if I go back further, like Stalin, yeah, Stalin died in a red one in 1953, but 40 years earlier, in 1913, he was arrested. This was the fifth time he's arrested and sent to Siberia, and he winds up going to Siberia for like 4 years. And They say this arrest, he was at this Bolshevik fundraiser, and the secret police found him there. And apparently he was trying to sneak out in a dress, which to the macho Russian culture is a real no-no. But Stalin, in his later years, he was sent to, like, this time he's sent to Siberia for the fifth time with this arrest. And he's there for 4 years, and they send him into deep Siberia this time, like above the Arctic Circle, much more sort of secluded than any of his previous exiles. But later in his life, he would talk about these years as, like, the best years of his life, when he was carefree and all he had to do was go fishing in Siberia. So, go figure. That's Stalin for you. Also around this time in 1913, the Romanovs were celebrating their 300th anniversary during this red one, which is really interesting because, of course, the Tsar and his wife go all over Russia celebrating this anniversary. Of course, they're only going to be alive for another 5 years, that unbeknownst to them. And the Russian Revolution began during a red one. This is the mutiny on the battleship Potemkin, and the war with Japan going really badly when Japan sinks their whole fleet. The first Bolshevik Congress began in 1905. And there was an assassination. The Tsar's brother-in-law, who was the mayor of Moscow, was killed during a red one. Remember, I said a lot of sort of Russians died during these red ones. So there was Stalin. There's this Grand Duke Sergei, and Tsar Alexander II, who he was killed in a bomb. And his oldest son died, who was the heir to the throne, but died during a red one. And then his sister had died during a red one. So a lot of Russians. Here's another Russian child, royal child, who died during a red one. A lot of it. A lot of Russian marriages. This is Alexander's marriage. I think I have at least 3 marriages or engagements happened during red ones, these czars. Yeah, here's another Russian marriage during a red one, royal marriage, and another Russian assassination during a red one, other Russian royal dying during a red one. It's just like, yeah, there's something to the red one and Russia. Okay. Oh, I'm getting some interesting requests here. Okay, I'll just run through these quickly. Joe Strum and the Clash, I definitely can go to. I have a couple of things to say about the Clash. Lana Del Rey, I do have her chart, but I know almost nothing about her life in music. Forgive me. I'm really stuck in my ways. I would like to look at her more, but I'd like to prepare. That would be like I know I've got her chart in my database, but that's almost all I know about her. I know her name. I know people are crazy about her, and I know almost nothing. I'm the kind of guy, when I was 20 years old, I knew everything about music. I knew every obscure little artist and record label and all that stuff. But I'm in my 50s now, and a lot of this stuff sort of blows by me. Forgive me. But I'll make a point of sort of looking at her chart. I have been meaning to. But I see Walt Whitman, Tom Petty, Joe Strummer. These are all people that I've excuse me. These are all people that I've studied to some degree. I think the most I have to say, and Anthony Bourdain. I have a couple of biographies of Bourdain, but I really have to dig in deeper. And I only saw a couple of his broadcasts. So I'd really, when I study someone, I really like to go deep into the weeds. If they're an author, I try to read everything they've written. If they're a musician, I try to listen to everything they've recorded, so on and so forth. So why don't these are all pretty good selections. I don't have as much to say about Tom Petty, although I've looked at his chart and his band and stuff. We don't have a birth time for him or Joe Strummer, but I'm going to go to Joe Strummer just because offhand there is the Clash. For those of you who don't know, Joe Strummer was the singer-songwriter in a band called The Clash. A British punk band in the late 70s, early 80s, who had a very sort of political focus. So this is Joe Strummer's date of birth. I, I I don't know what time he's born. He was actually born in Turkey because his father was a diplomat. Um, Oops, here we are. I'm just going to put up his natal chart here. I'll change the wheel style because I don't know what time he's born, so there's no need for angles. So yeah, the thing about Strummer is his sun is close to Regulus, and the thing about Regulus is it's kind of a delicate thing. Regulus can bestow amazing sort of honors on a person. I mean, think Trump's got Regulus rising, uh, which is not to say Regulus is always some awful person, but there is an issue with Regulus with sort of hubris getting the better of you, and you can see that with Trump and Joe Strummer. I think in his own way had some hubris towards the end of the clash in terms of uh, you know, uh, well, basically, his partner Mick Jones quit the Clash, and Joe Strummer, I think, thought he was going to sort of, come out on top, keeping the Clash going, but really, Mick Jones sort of eclipsed him in a way. Anyway, I'll just go into a quick little sort of Venus cycle analysis of the Clash, of this band, The Clash. They played their first show during a Blue 3 not long after an exterior conjunction. But really, a lot of their timeline coincides really nicely with the Venus retrograde cycle. For instance, their first album, uh, their first of all, their drummer Topper Hedden, and then their first album. These all happened. They got in their new drummer, who would be like their main drummer for most of the band. Eventually, he's going to get fired, but I'll get into that in a bit. But their first album is released, and they get their new drummer during the Red 1 Venus retrograde interval in Aries of 1977. And then a year and a half later, when we get to the Red 2, this is when their second album is released, Give Them Enough Rope. And it's right at this time that their manager is fired. He'll come back to the band, and he'll wind up sort of pushing Mick Jones out of the band. There's just a sort of personality problem there. But okay, the first album was released during a Red 1. The second album is released during a Red 2, and they lose their manager. And then we go ahead further. When we get to now, London Calling is the next album. It doesn't come out in a Red 3. It comes out a little before the Red 3. Wait, where's London Calling? Oh yeah, there it is. It comes out as Mars is about to go do this retrograde in Virgo with Jupiter and all this stuff. But this is a little too early for the Venus retrograde for the Red 3. But what does happen with the Red 3 is they start to have problems with their drummer's heroin addiction, Topper Hedden. And that's gonna wind up being a problem when they get to. Remember, he joined the band during the Red 1, and now he's got these drug problems that are causing problems for the band in the Red 3, and they really sort of get really bad when he's arrested for trying to smuggle heroin as they go into a Red 4, and this winds up getting him kicked out of the band. I think just after this Japanese tour. And then finally, Mick Jones quits the band during a Red 5. So that's, you remember, like the drummer joined during a Red 1 when they released the first album during the Red 1. Then the Red 2 is their second album coming out. The Red 3 is them touring London Calling and Topper Hedden's drug problems starting to cause a problem. By the Red 4, just as Combat Rock is coming out, Topper is arrested and ultimately fired from the band for his drug problem. And then finally we get to the Red 5, and this is when Mick Jones quits the Clash. The band do go on to make another album without him, but it's, if you're a real Clash fan, you don't even count that album, really. Not kind to say, but that tends to be the consensus. But yeah, this is an example of how you can follow one band their timeline according to a synodic cycle, and just see how, like, every 18 months you see a little sort of development in the story that sort of, in a way, tells the story of tells the whole story, and or it gives you these sort of windows in time where you can sort of connect dots in a narrative. Okay, I've just got a couple of questions. I'm going to be closing up soon, but I just want to answer these things in here. Danny Elfman will have to think about that soon. What cycle are we in currently? We're in a red 5. We've just gone into a red 5. Cosmic Rose, yes, I have talked about Putin. Putin is a mega red 5 guy. I did that in a previous live stream, but I might repeat it at some point. Long story short, very red 5. Uh, uh, well, maybe I just quickly, should I pull it up? Oh, what am I doing here? I'll just go through this very quickly because, like I said, I did cover it in a previous stream, but so Putin is a black 2 interval, but the red 5 interval has always been really, really popular for him. So this is another example of, like, you don't need to have natal Venus retrograde in order for Venus to be for the Venus synodic cycle to be really powerful, or for the retrogrades to be powerful. Now, this birth time, I don't know what to make about this birth time. And I've also discussed, like, there's even a conflict over his date of birth. Although I think, long story short, I do think this is his date of birth. This Saturn-Neptune conjunction he has is just, Russian history is perfectly timed to Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, and it would kind of make sense that he's, born at this time. But I went into some more detail about this the last time I talked about him, but I just want to do sort of the quick fix here. So his mother was born during a red 5. He graduated from college and enlisted in the KGB during a red 5 in 1975. 8 years later, in 83, he got married. 8 years later, in 91, is when he quit the KGB, when there was this whole attempted coup, and he, quit the KGB because of their involvement in that, apparently. And then 8 years after that, in 99, his father died during a red 5. Remember, his mother was born during a red 5. And then shortly after his father died, he literally had just gotten back from the funeral when, during a red 5, he was named prime minister of Russia. And this is the first day we ever heard about him in the news. He went from obscurity to suddenly being prime minister. And then by the end of this year, he would be elected president to replace Yeltsin. But it's really from this point on that he becomes the heir apparent of Russian power. And that's during a red 5. And then subsequent red 5s included when he personally went to Guatemala to speak to the Olympic Committee to try and petition for Sochi to host the Olympic Winter Games. They were considered like sort of a long shot to win the Winter Games, but they did get them thanks to Putin's personal intervention. And of course, it's right after these Winter Games ended that he, invaded the Crimea during a red 4. And this red 4, of course, is 8 years before he invaded Ukraine proper in 2022. So that's a red 4 thing. And then the last red 5 of his life was the 2015 red 5. And this is when Putin and Obama were both at the UN at the same time. This body language between the two of them sort of says it all. Putin kind of made Barack look bad. The whole Syria thing was going on. Anyway, long story short, I absolutely expect the red 5 that we're entering now to be Putin's, if not the end of his political career, at least sort of like some huge shift in his relationship to the country. He seems to be doomed to fail. But time will tell. But I mean, you get the sense, however it plays out, the red 5 interval has just always been a big period for him every 8 years. And, even if we don't know his correct birth time, or even if his correct date of birth, that's the beauty of this method, is you still have, astrological information pertaining to his life. even if we can't be sure of that other information, even if you can't do a proper full-on horoscopic astrology, I'm totally confident with this time of birth, and I'll just read the chart, as we normally do or want to do. That's the beauty of having this knowledge, is it gives you something even if you're missing sort of crucial details. Pixie's asking what Venus phase is Trump. Venus is a black 3, as was W, as was Clinton. For some reason, before those 3 guys, the only black 3 president the US ever had was Herbert Hoover. So it used to be this interval that never really came up in American politics. And then out of the blue, you got 3 black 3 presidents almost in a row, with, Obama, who's a white 5. Obviously between W and Trump. But that's one of the things that intrigues me, is you see that happen over history. Is like a country will go through a period, well, they'll have a bunch of people. I was mentioning earlier, there was a period in Canadian history when we had like 3 white 1 prime ministers virtually in a row, which is not, and that wasn't like a common interval for Canadian prime ministers before that. So sometimes you just see these clusters, and I sort of want to get into, as I go further, I want to sort of work out why that happens, why we get these clusters. And that might be something I talk about more. Something I sort of hinted at on Monday's stream when I was talking about world leaders, heads of state at the time of the world wars. But there's a lot more I could say about that as well. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I think my voice is going. We've done a good 2 hours, so this has been great fun. Thank you, everyone, for making this another really fun and successful stream. I really do find like yeah, that's right. All 3 born in summer 46. I really do find that these streams go better when I can interact with you guys. I really don't like doing like these lonely monologues, which I think is what I get on Friday. Is just not enough people can attend them or something. So I'm not going to do Fridays anymore. Just it's not a part of the schedule that works for me. But I will be back tomorrow, probably on my own. But I'll try and I'll see how I'll see how Watson is tomorrow. Maybe he'll be able to join me and we can make up the team stream tomorrow. If not, I'll do another soul stream. Mondays, I tend to also get a really good crowd. So yeah, I it's the Leo in me. I need an audience. I can't just sit here and talk to no one. Even though a lot of people wind up seeing the video later, the interaction is what really makes this work for me, makes it feel like a success. So thank you all so much for participating, or for just watching quietly and observing or listening. Even some of you might just listen to the audio. However you enjoy this stream, thank you so much. Here, I'm gonna unshare my screen. There we are. Yeah, thank you all so much. Have yourselves a terrific Sunday. For those of you who follow the Astrology podcast, Chris and I are working on doing an episode on Venus retrograde very soon, so stay tuned for that. I just got to finish some notes, and I imagine we'll probably tape it sometime in the coming days, so look out for that. Very often he records an episode and releases it maybe a week later, because he has fancy editors and all that stuff, stuff that I'm not taking the time to do with my live stream for the time being. But yeah, look out for me on the Astrology podcast, where we'll talk about Venus retrograde, and tomorrow I'll be on the live stream tomorrow. So join me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern time, and I look forward to seeing you all then. And have yourselves a terrific Sunday. All right. Be well. See you soon.